Step dancing in North Kerry has had a long and proud tradition, stretching back to the 18th century. It had and continues to have a special place in the social and cultural life of the area. Step dancers in North Kerry were afforded a special status and were revered, at times more than individuals who won All-Ireland senior football medals would carry. The late Listowel historian John F. McMahon wrote in 1934 that the people of North Kerry over a century ago brought their dances to the level of a fine art. Common throughout the countryside were dancing competitions, at which the local poet and the musician were generally the judges, the prize in North Kerry being a eulogy by the poet in praise of the winning dancer. According to Father Pat Ahern, the creator and first artistic director of Shim Satira, the dancing tradition of North Kerry was more than an artistic accomplishment. It was part of their way of life, in the same way that saving the hay was, or bringing home the cows for milking. When they met, they talked about steps as footballers talked about football. According to Father Pat, North Kerry step dancing is a unique feature of the folk cultural life in the region and unique in the whole of Ireland. Dr. Catherine Foley, lecturer at the University of Limerick, is the author of Step Dancing in Ireland and Irish Traditional Step Dancing in North Kerry. She is regarded as one of the leading experts in the world of Irish step dancing and has a long association with North Kerry.
In the 1980s, I was introduced to Irish traditional step dancing in North Kerry, and that came about with my working for Muckross House in Killarney. I was invited to be a collector of Irish traditional music, song and dance. And in 1983, I was invited to come to North Kerry to collect traditional step dancing. And this was because Father Pat Ahern, who was the artistic director of Shim Satira, had gone to Ned Myers in Muckross House to see if the collection that was going on at the time in Muckross House could be extended to the traditional step dancers of North Kerry. So in February, I think it was the 23rd of February 1983, I came up here to the Teach Shimsa in Finuig, and I was to meet for the first time the elderly traditional step dancers of North Kerry. And many of these traditional step dancers would have learned from Jeremiah Molyneux, who was said to be the last of the itinerant dancing masters of North Kerry. There's a story about one of the dancers that I met. His name was Jerry Nolan. And one day Jerry Nolan was going along the road in his horse and cart, but he was trying to remember a step, so he stopped his cart and he went out onto the road to practice his dancing. And in the meantime, a priest was coming along his Volkswagen and he couldn't get past the horse and cart. So he got out of the car to find where was the driver of this horse and cart, and he found Jerry Nolan up the road practicing a step. And the next Sunday at Mass, he announced for the pulpit that there was this blackguard who couldn't get on with his work that day, that he had to get out of the horse and cart and to practice his step. But as was explained to me, Jerry Nolan loved step dancing and he valued steps, the choreographic structures of steps, the beauty that was in a step dance. And to Jerry Nolan, work could wait, the horse and cart could wait, but to forget that step, to lose that step, that could not happen, because that was an important part of his heritage, an important part of what it was for him to be of North Kerry. The beginning of step dancing, it goes back to the end of the 18th century, and a dancing master by the name of O'Kireen, who came from Castlemaine, is reputed to have been the first dancing master to have systematised Irish step dance into what we know it today. So in other words, the 8-bar structure, the choreographic structure of a step dance. And I'm sure there were other dancing masters around as well at the time who would have actually systematised the dance, but his name has gone down in history. And then other dancing masters afterwards, such as Reedy, and then you'd have had, of course, the famous Maureen, or Tom Moore, as he was called. And Tom Moore, to me, is an extraordinary dancing master. I think he was born in 1823, and he died in 1878. And Maureen is extraordinary because he taught before the famine and he died after the famine in Listowel workhouse, and he died within a coma because of exposure. And he had time before he had died to pass on that tradition of step dancing to another dancing master called Neddy Bat Welch. And Neddy Bat Welch passed it on to the dancing master that we all know today, Jeremiah Molyneux. And Jeremiah Molyneux is understood to be the very last of these itinerant dancing masters. And when I say he's seen as the last, it was because it was a system of teaching that these dancing masters taught. Maureen, Neddy Bat Welch, Molyneux, they all travelled to teach their step dance art. And generally they taught by the Dancing Masters Quarter. And this is very interesting because this notion of the quarter was not just typical in Ireland, it was also the same kind of a system that you had in Scotland and in England. There was always a Dancing Masters Quarter. And in Ireland, this Dancing Masters Quarter was a 6-week system. And after 6 weeks, they would move on to another area, and then another 6 weeks, they'd move on to another area. And they generally moved on to an area where they could stay in a farmhouse, and they taught the dancing in the farmhouse. And then during the day they might move out to national schools and teach children in national schools. But to teach in a national school they first had to get permission from the parish priest. So these dancing masters are extremely important, and to me they were so important because they embodied knowledge, cultural knowledge, historical knowledge, and the dancers knew that as well.
Well, the dancing master was held in great regard wherever he went, because first of all his talent was unique. Not everybody could dance, and because he was able to teach this unique style, he was regarded as a special person, and very often they had privileges too, the dancing masters, which other people didn't have. For instance, there was a famous dancing master in Glynn, County Limerick, Taigin Ruas Gunlawn. From the night of Glynn he got a free house and land, garden, and so on, because of his status in the community. And some of the dancing masters would have taught, deportment and so on, and you had to have a proper carriage, as they used to call it, for the dance. And the discipline that imposed on people needed that, your balance and so on, and you had to. And then, of course, the whole idea of dancing the same step with what they call the right leg and the left leg. And you were grand with the right, but when you came to the left, you were using another part of the brain, as it were. And it was a great discipline for that reason, dancing the step with both. That still, of course, is the case with all the dancers today, that they do left and right. But more so with the Molyneux dance, he composed a step for the right leg. And they used to say about him that he composed the step sitting down by his little fireside at home in Gunsborough, up in North Kerry. And he had a special chair which he sat on, which he made himself, made the chair for himself, and he sugoned it with what we believe was the old tires of a bicycle. And he was to sit down, and he made up the steps on the ball of his thumb, with the right leg and the left leg. And then he got up and he tried out the step and would be able to work it out. But the discipline of left and right, the step was composed for the right leg. Then you had to switch your brain around to do it with the left leg. And that discipline was very important. And it stood them in good stead afterwards, I think, as well. Often the dancers carried themselves well, walked very, very well and smartly.
Step dancing in North Kerry is characterised by the different and rich combinations of foot movements, the upright torso, the hands held loosely by the sides of the body, the connection with traditional dance music, and the ability to improvise within the system. Jimmy Hickey, now 77 years of age, is teaching this unique North Kerry step dancing style in the schools and communities of North Kerry for the past 60 years. Jimmy is also one of the last remaining shoemakers in the county and continues a business that was started by his father Joe almost 90 years ago at number 4 Colbert Street, Listowel.
I suppose I've been a shoemaker all my life, only My mother and father, they loved the dancing and they encouraged me to keep dancing. And I mixed both. As I was growing older, I was doing the dancing and I was doing the shoemaking and repairing at the same time. And then the dancing took over. When I'd be down, when I was young, doing the dancing, I'd have to pass in the hallway. The father would be here in the shop with the rest of them. And he'd be, well, what did you learn today? And I'd show him a bit of a step, and after a while I got good at it, and I used to be doing a lot of the teaching below with Liam Deneen. And I'd be teaching all the beginners. And when he'd come up Saturday around 12 o'clock, he'd say, what did you learn today? Oh, I was practicing. And he'd say, you're going down there no more, you're learning nothing, wasting my money. And that went on for a few weeks. And then the mother had slipped me the few bob to go down, and I'd be down. And I was coming up one Saturday, and I had done nothing. I was only teaching. And I suppose you could, the tipping was like, the tipping was, you know, I could hear him and hear. And I stopped below at the bottom of the street and I said, geez, I said, I learned nothing. I have to do something. So he said, as I was coming in the door, he said, well, show me, did you learn anything today? So I made something up. I said, I did. I said, I did. But geez, he said, you're going down again there next Saturday. That's lovely. He did. And I did that for a long time to keep dancing. I did. I was only making it up as I went along. You know, keeping him happy, you see.
Father Pat Ahern was inspired by one of the legendary figures of North Kerry step dancing, Jerry Mulno, at a very young age, when he was a pupil at Maivan National School. The Munich style was a key element in the early Shim Satira shows.
Well, I got to know Johnny Mullineau, or Munix as we called him, when I was still a very young lad in Maivan, going to Maivan National School. I'd say I was eight or 9 years of age. And I remember one day there was a knock on the door and this little small man appeared in the doorway, dressed in a brown suit. And he announced, through the teacher, he announced that he would be taking classes in the parish hall for the next 6 weeks. And wondered if anybody would be interested, would they call in after school to the hall. So a crowd of us did, out of pure curiosity probably, as much as anything else. I'd never seen an Irish dancer previous to that. And the first thing he did with us was he said, I'd like to show you what he'll be. He wanted to whet our appetites. And I will never forget to this day what I saw. And the extraordinary, for me, it was extraordinary feat of rhythm and dance he did with his little feet. It's something that has stayed with me ever since. To me, it's very gratifying to know that the tradition of Mullineau in the Mullineau area of North Kerry is still alive and well. And that to know that Jimmy Hickey is carrying on that tradition so well, and especially in the schools, I think that's where it really counts. That's where it came to me in the first place. And I think to get people at that age, young age, and to acquaint them with the dance. And of course, Jimmy himself would be very much in the Mullineau tradition. When he wasn't, I don't think he was a pupil of Mullineau exactly, But he was a pupil of Liam Dineen, and Liam Dineen was a pupil of Molyneux. So he has very much the Molyneux tradition. And I saw very recently a piece of film where Jimmy Hickey was dancing with, I think it was John Joe Donnell and from Liz Elton, and I think it was the Flacchio and the Stool. And he's very much in the same tradition. I used to keep in touch with the dance myself over the years, and but probably had forgotten all about it when it came to the founding of Sím Satíre. And my memory of the Molyneux dance was so strong that I figured that this dance should form a kind of a foundational discipline for the Sím Satíre people.
When Bill Whelan was commissioned by the Irish government to write the Seville Suite to mark Ireland's participation at the European Cultural Exposition in Seville in Spain in 1992, he reached out to Father Pat Ahern and Sím Satíre for their involvement in the conclusion of the piece.
Bill Whelan was the composer of what he called the Seville Suite. The expo was in Seville, in Spain, and at the end of it he had about 3 minutes of what I call the coming together of two cultures, the Spanish and the Irish. And the Spanish culture was depicted by a Spanish flamenco dancer in the person of Maria Pajes. She was a well-known, very, very well-known Spanish flamenco dancer. And we were asked to supply a dancer from Sím Satíre for the Irish dance. And we got Michael Murphy to do the dance. It would be strictly in the tradition of Molyneux. And she came over to Tralee for a week to rehearse the dance with us. And we had the music, recorded music from Bill. And we worked it out over a week. And then they went out and they danced it in Spain.
Throughout the connection that we had and that I had with Father Pat Ahern, it gave me a view of a man who had an essentially really, really pure view of what Irish music and dance should be. But married to that was his fearlessness with experimentation. He wasn't saying this is Irish dance and that's the end of it. He was saying this is Irish dance, and Irish dance and music has got the capacity to move forward. And his creative input, he had a great sense of theatre, great sense of dynamics, all of those things that you want when you're creating a piece of theatre that is interesting, both musically and visually. And in terms of emotionally, he knew what the capacity for music and dance to create emotional expression in theatre. He knew what the possibilities of that had, and he was able to reach that. And I think in his creation of Sím Satíre and his work with Sím Satíre, it was always faithful to the folklore element of the music and the dance, but it was also very much looking towards its capacity for development. It was never fixed. And that's really what I think Father Pat and people like him, they're essential to the growth and the development of Irish music and dance. When Moya Doherty came to me to write what became Riverdance, and we did Riverdance, I again incorporated those Spanish rhythms in the music. And then when we went to do the full 2-hour show, we reached back to Maria Pajes in Spain and worked the Spanish flamenco into Riverdance, the show. And that became very much a signature of the music and of the choreography for Riverdance. So that early connection with Sím Satíre was essential in making that first connection, which actually gave us the inspiration ultimately for what became Riverdance.
Jonathan Kelleher, current artistic director of Shimsatira, started his dancing career with Jimmy Hickey at Drumclough National School during the 1970s. Under Jimmy's influence, he developed a genuine passion and interest in the Jerry Molyneux style of dance.
So I started dancing when I was probably about 6 years of age in Drumclough School up in North Kerry there. And Jimmy Hickey was my first ever dancing teacher. It took me a while to get into it. It took me, I wasn't being the fastest of starters, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I absolutely love the North Kerry style dance. It's a real old style. It's very unique, and we're so lucky to have it and to have people that are still teaching it around as well. I came through the ranks here in Sheamus, I suppose, and it's a long journey. I've been here quite a long time, but I've enjoyed every minute of it. And really, like, it all kind of goes back to those young days when in Drumclough School with Jimmy and all my classmates, and we're learning the basic jump to trees and all that. I suppose I owe everything to him really, because he was the one that started me on the road. And again, I suppose when you do talk about the North Kerry style, it is so important that it is carried on, and that's one of the jobs we do here in Sheamus as well, in trying to preserve that and take into the future for new generations. And there are a lot of people out there, the likes of Jimmy Hickey as well, who's carrying on that tradition very strongly up in North Kerry to this day. And again, it's just so important that people like that do this.
Patrick O'Mahony, now one of the lead dancers in Riverdance, began his dancing career with Jimmy Hickey at a very young age.
So I was about 1 year and 9 months when I first started dancing with Jimmy Hickey, apparently. So I've been told that I had my first class in a nappy and a bottle. And and I was with Jimmy then for 5 years, 6 years, and then I moved on, of course. But it all stems back to Jimmy, and his tradition and his style stuck with me throughout my career in dance. So Jimmy's style is very traditional, very earthy. His body movement, everything that he does on the floor in the dancing class molded me as a dancer for when I continued on. His rhythm, it's kind of like a Shanos style kind of dance, but yet you're still kind of borderline Shanos and Irish. He's kind of just there, that real traditional Shanos style, but yet he kind of influenced in the Irish dance as well. And in 2012, I auditioned for Riverdance, and I've been with them now going on 7 years. Travelled the world. My first tour with them was Australia, New Zealand, went on to do the Gaiety in Dublin, and then I've done several tours in America, Japan, China,